This is the LZR Project, an episodic story series by David N. Alderman. The LZR Project takes place within David's Expired Reality universe and serves as a prequel to the main novels in his Expired Reality series. You can find out more about David's Expired Reality series at davidnalderman.com. Episode number 27. Wednesday, May 13th, 1998. A midday breeze swept through Carrie Green's hair as she stood atop the bank of Lysallis building and overlooked the city of Lysallis. She pulled her white sweater closer to her body, enjoying the sun but not enjoying the cold breeze at that height. This was the only place she could go to escape the project, her family, and everyone else who wanted to bother her. From her vantage point on the roof, the different districts of Lysallis, industrial, financial, midnight, and even the pleasure district, spread out at all angles from her, surrounding her in their glory and their misfortune. Portions of the pleasure district stood in piles of rubble, ancient ruins of a once thriving culture of prostitution and sexual filth. She looked out on the main downtown area to watch the busyness of the traffic and the people milling about. I wonder how many unrequited loves are out there right now dealing with the pain I'm dealing with, she thought. She shook her head, finding it to be a ridiculous thing that she dwell on such juvenile matters. She had love within her heart for David Corbin, but because of that love she could not allow the events that she had witnessed in the caves in Crystal City to come true. To save his life, she would have to keep her mouth shut, but it was becoming more and more difficult as each day passed. David had already caught on to her bad attitude. He just hadn't mustered up the courage to say anything to her about it. She was glad for this. She didn't want a confrontation with him, though she knew one was coming. The feelings that had been building between them all these years were at a breaking point. One of them was going to tell the other how they felt, and Carrie knew she couldn't be that person. And if David said something, she would shut him down. The problem was she didn't know if she could shut him down without breaking down herself. Every movement he made, every word he spoke, everything he did, made her fall more in love with him. It was a curse, really, amplified by her vision in Crystal City. She knew, of course, that the possibility remained that the gypsy woman and the amethyst walls could all have been a ruse. Why would anyone in their right mind trick me into thinking David would die if I told him how I felt? Carrie could, of course, tell David the truth, but in his current state of mind, it probably wouldn't be the best idea. Lately, Carrie found him to be aggressive and easily agitated. Many things bothered him, but he chose to talk about very few of them. He was bottling everything up, and Carrie didn't really want to be around when it all came out. The door to the roof opened and Carrie turned to find Veronica walking toward her. She wore a bright blue blouse and dark gray skirt. Her high heels were ones Carrie had handed down to her some months earlier, a designer brand that Carrie's mother had purchased for her. Her mother knew nothing about the modest style Carrie wore, which is why Carrie passed the shoes along to Veronica, who in her own right was considered to be a fashion mogul, at least to Carrie. "Hey, you okay?" Veronica asked. Carrie nodded. "I guess." "Let me guess. David?" Carrie's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "Don't act so surprised. Usually if you're brooding, it's because you're hung up on David." "I'm not really hung up, He's been acting different lately, hasn't he?" Veronica asked. Carrie nodded, happy to have his behavior be the topic of discussion instead of her feelings for him. "He seems to be bothered by something big." "Mr. Big," Veronica replied. "But maybe something bigger than that." "I know he's still worried about Scarlet Rogue," Carrie offered. Veronica gazed out on the city, her long hair whipping around in the breeze. "He still hasn't figured out what's going on over there. Too much red tape. Roger refuses to help him. Ridley can't do much. He needs to let her go." Veronica nodded. "Maybe, but you have to admit that his instinct is usually spot on. If he thinks there's something odd going on there at the facility she's being held in, he won't stop until he finds out what." "I know." Veronica patted her friend on the arm. "Come on, we're being summoned. One of Mr. Big's goons wants to switch sides supposedly, and we need to go find out what he knows." Carrie went with her friend as they met up with David, Sean, and Ridley in the parking garage. They took the LZR SUV into downtown Lysallis and stopped at the Conniption, a bar and grill which sported a neon sign of a screaming face. Once in the establishment, Carrie felt underdressed in her sweater and jeans. She suddenly desired her bulletproof vest and cargo pants, especially if they were going to confront one of Mr. Big's associates. The front lobby of the bar and grill sported a life-size cutout of Charm, a popular music diva who had won over most of Lysallis and almost all of Venera with her catchy tunes over the years. The singer sported a red and black spandex jumpsuit and multicolored hair. Carrie didn't care for Charm's generic and manufactured tone, which Carrie felt was created simply to make money and not melody. Carrie wondered what a hardcore bar was doing with a cutout of the aging singer, and then she noticed the tiny holes all over the cardboard. Patrons had been using it as a dartboard. Carrie smiled at this. The five of them entered the bar area where a handful of customers mingled around the room. One customer in particular, an extremely obese man, sat at the end of the marble counter. Ridley took a seat next to him while Carrie and her friends stood around her. "Mr. Dietz?" Ridley asked. The heavy-set man glanced around the bar at the other customers. "Do you know what discretion is?" "We don't have time for games," Ridley said. "You contacted us." The man turned around on his stool and rubbed his chunky chin with his fingers. "You might not have time to play games, but I have all the time in the world. See, I have something you folks want. I'll give it to you, but for a price." "How much?" David asked. The man looked David squarely in the eyes. "Not money. I have plenty of that after working for Mr. Big for the last 5 years. No, I want something a little more unique, a little more interesting." "Spit it out," Ridley growled. "We have better things to do." "I'm sure you don't. The information I have will undoubtedly place Mr. Big right into your hands. See, I have need of some assistance with certain things." "Like?" Ridley coaxed. "Personal matters. See, once I tell you what I might tell you, Mr. Big is going to come after me full force. As you can see," he motioned to his jeans and button-down shirt, which sagged and bulged in different parts. "I'm not exactly in a form to fight back all that well." Ridley crossed her arms over her chest. "You want a bodyguard?" "Forget it," David snapped. "We're not mercenaries." The man leaned into the stool a bit. Carrie wondered how long it would take for the piece of furniture to collapse underneath him. "Admit it," the man barked. "Once I turn on Big, he's going to send his entire organization after me." Ridley glanced at David. "He has a point." "I know he does," David replied, "but we're not in the bodyguard business." "Semantics, Mr. Corbin. You play bodyguard for a little while, and in return you get the big fish, Mr. Big. Otherwise, you can keep running your little project into the ground trying to get your hands on him." "How can we trust you?" Veronica asked. "You're one of Big's cronies, and we've been betrayed before." "Cronies? You better watch your mouth. I'm a professional. I have technical skills that are in high demand. I simply lend my skills to Mr. Big for his organization." "I don't have to. He just happens to pay the top credit that I'm looking for. Just like you, I need to eat and put a shelter over my head." Sean scoffed. "So you think of yourself as a glorified mercenary? Is that what you're saying? And you want us to protect you while you spill the beans on the rest of Mr. Big's organization?" "Yes," Mr. Dietz answered. "That's exactly it. Each of you knows how important information is, and I have information that will put a nice, tidy bow on this whole situation with Mr. Big. You can go back to your humdrum lives and eke out a meager existence while the world keeps on spinning." "That's a lot of talk coming from a low-life criminal," David grumbled. The man's eyes narrowed on David. He shifted his massive weight and struggled to stand to his feet, lifting off the stool like a helicopter carrying a load of wrecking balls. He took a few steps toward David, overshadowing him. Ridley stepped in between them, shoving the man toward his stool. "Sit down," she ordered. "We're not here for a fight. We're here to build an alliance, however temporary it may be." Mr. Dietz grabbed Ridley's shoulders. "You better learn who's boss around here." He slammed the front of his skull into Ridley's forehead, producing a loud crack as Ridley fell backwards and tumbled to the floor. David slid his boomerang out of his back pocket and swung it across the man's face, cutting through his skin to form a long line of blood that ran from his mouth to his ear. Mr. Dietz growled, stumbled back, and tripped on the stool, crashing to the ground in a haze of obscenities and groans. David pulled his arm back, clearly ready to attack the man again. "Touch her again, and I'll cut your throat." Carrie watched with horror as the bartender pulled a shotgun out from behind the counter and cocked the barrel before pointing it at David. "I don't tolerate horseplay in my establishment. Now get out." David slid his boomerang into his pocket and helped Ridley to her feet. The other patrons in the bar stood to their feet and began to close in on the group. A lanky man with a backwards baseball cap picked up a pool cue. "Why you guys making all this racket?" Ridley motioned to the pool cue in his hands. "Sit back down and mind your own business." "What did you say?" Ridley pulled out her police badge and flashed it at the man and the crowd gathering behind him. "All of you sit down or leave. We're here on police business." "A cop?" the lanky man asked. "A cop in our bar?" Carrie stood in front of Ridley. "We're the Lazerblades doing work on behalf of the LZR Project." "The laser whats?" The bartender pointed a shotgun at the crowd. "Everyone settle down. I don't want any trouble in my bar." The lanky man laughed and then swung the pool cue at Carrie, slamming it into the side of her neck. The impact sent her body sideways as her head made impact with the marble bar. She fell to the floor, her head blossoming with pain. She reached a hand up, grabbed onto the edge of the counter, and pulled herself to her feet. Before she could react to the man's attack, David took a position in front of her. Without so much as a word, David grabbed hold of the man's pool stick and kicked him in the chest. The man lost his grip on the cue and flew backwards into the pool table. David lifted his knee and slammed the cue stick against his thigh, breaking the cue in half. He shoved one of the broken ends into the man's leg, breaking the skin and muscle as a wooden rod broke through to the other side. The man cried out as he fell to the floor. An older man in a leather vest broke a beer bottle against the edge of a table and lunged for David. David quickly grabbed hold of the man's wrist, snapped it backwards, and shoved the broken bottle into the man's face, mutilating his left eye and part of his nose. Carrie stumbled back to where Veronica was positioned near the fallen Mr. Dietz, refusing to believe what she was seeing. David swung the other half of the pool cue at another patron who was advancing on him, spearing the woman in the arm before Ridley could pull him back. Sean jumped into the fray, fists flying, and took down a patron who was about to throw a chair at Ridley. Mr. Dietz managed to crawl over the pieces of broken stool and get to his feet, panting with the excessive motion. Carrie was too busy watching David's bloodbath to stop Mr. Dietz before he could wrap his arm around her throat. She kicked and struggled, but his grip was firmly locked around her windpipe, squeezing the breath from her. Veronica realized what was happening and leapt on top of Mr. Dietz, putting him in a chokehold of her own. David rushed the large man and shoved the pointed tip of his boomerang into the man's shoulder. Blood spurted out into David's face, painting him a horrific splatter of crimson. The arm around Carrie's neck released and she fell to the floor, gasping for air. Gunshots rang out. Everyone froze and looked to the center of the room where Ridley stood, pistol raised above her head, smoke escaping from the barrel of her gun. The remaining patrons rushed out of the bar. David stumbled back away from Mr. Dietz, his eyes wide in fear. Carrie scooted away from the wounded fat man as Veronica crawled off the man's back and attempted to pull the boomerang from his shoulder. David looked down at his hands, which were covered in blood. What have I done? Veronica dislodged the boomerang and concealed it in the waistband of her skirt. Mr. Dietz groaned and fluttered his eyes as blood oozed out of the open wound. His voice seemed distant and garbled. You little shits are going to pay for this. The bartender pointed the shotgun at David. Get out of my bar! Veronica carefully approached David and put her hand on his shoulder. David, just calm down. You're okay. He's alive. Just take it easy. Ridley holstered her gun. We need to get out of here. David nodded and then fell to his knees and vomited across the barroom floor. Come on, man, the bartender shouted. Get out of my bar. Veronica pulled David to his feet. Come on, I'll help you out. We'll get you back to the project. Sean shook his hands, motioning to his wounded knuckles. Haven't been able to fight like that in a while. Carrie stood to her feet, her mouth saying words that she didn't tell it to. What if David's arrested? Veronica shook her head. Not going to happen. I won't let it. Ridley won't let it. Ridley nodded. We'll do what we have to and say what we have to make sure David doesn't take a nasty fall for this. That guy was asking for trouble, as were the other patrons who decided to lay hands on Carrie. He's making this a better world, Mr. Dietz said. He's making you a better person, David. Veronica turned David's head so he was looking at her and not Mr. Dietz. Stay with us. We'll get you out of here and back to the project. She turned him around and moved him toward the front of the bar. Ridley pointed to Mr. Dietz. Call an ambulance for that one, she said to the bartender. He was so violent, Carrie whispered, shivering. She pulled her sweater tight against her chest. I've never seen him so violent before. Veronica turned to her friend. He had to be. He saved your life. I know, but did David have to do exactly what he did? Stabbing that man? He almost stabbed him in the heart. We don't have time to contemplate all of this now, Ridley said as they stepped outside. A crowd of bar patrons and other neighborhood citizens had formed across the street. Ridley opened the back door of the SUV and helped Veronica set David inside. Let's get back to the project. We'll inform President Anderson of what happened and do our best to keep David out of the public spotlight. Sean sat in the back seat between Carrie and David. He turned to David, a smirk on his face. You finally did me proud. Thank you for listening to the LZR Project. If you are interested in reading more of David's Expired Reality series, please check out the author's webpage at davidnalderman.com.